Faster than a fraudulent performance measure, stronger than a misplaced decimal point, able to leap complex compliance requirements in a single bound. It's Super Auditor! Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Auditors Save the World, one audit project at a time, where we bring you thrilling tales of daring audits and brave financial reviews. Here, our heroes don't wear capes, but they do wield the power of empirical evidence. Brought to you by the pros at Yellowbook-CPE. In each episode, we interview those legendary auditors who have truly rescued the day. Stay tuned, listeners, because this is one story you won't want to miss. And folks, don't forget to subscribe to our show in your podcast app of choice. And now, here's your host, Lita Hart-Fanta.
In this episode, we introduce you to a true hero of accountability and transparency, a champion of fairness who doesn't just track down wrongdoing, but changes the game. Meet Kelly, a fraud investigator with the heart of an auditor and a knack for uncovering the stories numbers tell. And believe it or not, her path to this calling was practically written in the stars, or at least in her Myers-Briggs personality profile, which recommended that she pursue the noble work of auditing. But Kelly isn't just here to catch criminals or send fraudsters packing. No, her mission goes beyond accusations and jail time. Kelly thrives on working alongside auditors, tackling challenges together, and finding ways to resolve issues while adding value to the organization she serves. Her fascinating work history tells the tale of someone who's always looking to build, improve, and make a difference. In this episode, Kelly shares her insights and strategies to help auditors uncover fraud and embrace the bigger picture. It's not just about balancing the books. It's about strengthening the system one case at a time. So, ladies and gentlemen, grab your notebooks and prepare to be inspired by Kelly, the value-adding vigilante. You just showed me your Myers-Briggs results for your type, and the number one thing they recommended that you become is a auditor. What's the second thing they said you should do?
Financial manager, and I was a stockbroker and a bond trader, and then computer mathematics manager. The last number 10 was accountant.
Wow. And you have not studied accounting. You are a fraud investigator.
I did take one accounting class in college.
Yeah.
My dad made me.
Yeah. And it was torture, right?
No, I actually like accounting. I mean, I was a licensed stockbroker and commodities trader. So I know my way around certain things.
Yeah.
But number one is auditor. And I just think that
is hilarious.
Yeah.
And how'd you get into fraud investigation from that beginning as a stockbroker?
We had a dirty client.
Oh, in the stock brokerage?
Mm-hmm.
A client that was buying stock from you, or you had a fellow broker who was dirty?
No, a client who came in with $150,000 that he had stolen. And this was back before Know Your Customer.
Yeah. So
we didn't have an obligation to know. We knew it was Oregon. We figured he grew some pot.
Yeah.
But U.S. Customs called asking about him, and I giggled. And then he took his money immediately. She caught him. And then like a year and a half later, I called her and I said, I want to do what you do. I knew that guy. It didn't make sense. And she's like, really? And they had a special hiring program with people with certain backgrounds, and that's how I got in. I didn't grow up wanting to be a special agent at all. I just figured I'd be like a financial advisor, but I'm a terrible salesperson. See, none of those said salesperson.
Right. They're all analytical. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, I wasn't supposed to be an auditor either, but here we are.
Yeah, I know.
You ended up working for Customs.
Yeah, so I was hired for my financial background, and I was, so Customs, everyone thinks of airport and borders, but we had an office in downtown Seattle. No one knew who we were. We wore regular clothes, and I was assigned to Group 2, which was the money laundering white-collar crime group.
All right.
That included narcotics and things like that, but we had an undercover operation. because law enforcement does undercover. And an older agent who was getting ready to retire had been running that. And then they gave it to me because they said, she's actually got a financial background. So let's give it to her.
All right. Now, who were you looking at? Like,
We did all sorts of things. We did people who had imported illegal art
okay,
and artifacts.
okay.
We did anything that comes in or out of the country, money in and out of the country. Unfortunately, child pornography in and out of the country.
Mm.
And so we would use the undercover to, infiltrate groups. I did a large immigration. Some guy was selling green cards.
Okay, so you got a tip that there were somebody selling green cards. So did you go try to buy a green card? Is that what your undercover was?
We worked with Border Patrol. They were separate at the time. We worked with Border Patrol, and they had an undercover agent in there who buddied up to the guy who was selling the green cards. My specific undercover role was I was the money launderer. And so he would sell them, and then he had to get rid of the cash.
Yeah.
And so he hired me, and I'd charge a fee, 10%.
Ah,
And so,
I gotcha. Okay, great. So you had a budget of money.
well, it was the whole region. So sometimes the Portland office would have something, sometimes the Blaine office would have something.
Mhm,
So it and you had to get approved to run an undercover operation. So, you had to work with headquarters.
mhm.
And that's where I think headquarters wanted to make sure that, because, we know on TV and movies, undercover can go, woo, crazy. And so they sent auditors out to make sure that expenses and revenue were legitimate.
All right.
And so,
Just as you started your new job, just as you entered your new job, the old guy retired, you get the position, and then all of a sudden, hey, here comes the auditors.
yes,
Within like a couple of months.
yes,
All right. And you were in dread.
yes, because prior I had worked at a commodity firm, and when the auditors would show up there, they're trying to catch you that you've traded wrong or
Right. Not filled out this form or whatever
right,
it is. Right.
exactly. And then, as my career progressed, I was only at customs for 5.5 years, which is a whole other story. But my husband got a job in the middle of the country with no border. So not like anything nefarious. It was just, there's no border. But as I've progressed and as I have worked with auditors in other capacities, I look back at that customs, you got the little black suit auditors that come out from DC and they're fresh faced and, they're working for back then, one of the big 8 firms.
Right.
And, I felt that they wanted to catch us doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And even though I was just,
Some auditors do approach their work that way.
yeah.
But these were not doing that.
Yeah. And we hadn't done anything wrong. At the end of the audit,
Right.
the guy was like a penny off or something like that for, because we had cash. We
Yeah.
it wasn't just checkbooks. We had cash. And receipts and things like that. And so I look back at it now and I'm like, I could have learned so much from them instead of being scared of them.
Mm.
And I was scared of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though I was the one who carried the gun.
Well, hopefully you wouldn't shoot some auditors, would you, Kelly?
No.
No.
Even though my assistant special agent in charge was not happy that they scratched his conference room table. He was very upset about that. So it was kind
we're pretty destructive, right? When you give us some files.
So, but
Yeah.
it taught me a lesson. I love audit because they always want to make things better. And if I were working with audit now, right off the bat, I would cultivate a good relationship. I worked with audit at the shoe company, and I had a great relationship with audit.
Right.
They would call if we got like an alert line, a tip,
Mhm.
because I was an investigator, if there was anything criminal, I would be called in. But a lot of times it was just a process that was broken. And maybe someone saw that like they could drive a truck through that process. And so audit and I would partner. And once we realized it wasn't criminal in nature, it was just bad business practice, audit and I would work to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what it was so much more rewarding. It's not rewarding sitting across the table from someone saying, I know you took the money. And, I'm a certified fraud examiner, so we don't say it that we don't do innocence or guilt. We could say, we know the money went from this account to your bank account. Please explain it.
Mm.
Whereas with audit, you could say, how is it that you could get money from here to here? And how can we stop that? How
Mhm.
can we
Right.
make
Yeah.
it so the next smart person doesn't do it?
Right.
I also think, again, I've trained a ton of auditors, love the IIA and their chapters and everything like that. They are so curious. My hardest audience are my peers, meaning investigators, because they're like, oh, we've seen that. We've seen that. Auditors are like, oh my gosh, tell me more. Like, I just think they're such a curious bunch. And I'm going to say that investigators are maybe a little more jaded.
Well, because they deal with criminals, maybe? Is that what it is? Or they come from a law enforcement background? Or why do you think that is, that they're jaded?
Yeah, I think they see people more at their worst.
I see.
And, you don't go into, as a special agent and investigator, you don't go in and say, okay, well, you're going to jail, but let's talk about how you could have fixed this.
Yeah.
Whereas auditors are like, okay, no one's going to jail here. We've got a lot of bad processes. And then also the buy-in from other groups. Like, I'm going to say law enforcement. And because I was in law enforcement, I can say this. And I have changed immensely. Law enforcement used to keep their sources very tight.
All right.
Like, you didn't give out sources because that's how you made cases. I don't do that anymore. I give everything out. Auditors are a little more fresh-faced about that. And they're like, let's pull in this person and see how this IT person could fix this.
Mm.
I just think it's much more, I think audit is much more collaborative amongst themselves. This is my thing that I say to auditors especially. One day you will step in it, and you must always have the walk-away fund, because you will step in it and maybe you'll bring it to someone's attention, and that's a person that now they don't want you.
Yeah.
And so they'll either ask you to do something that you're not comfortable with, or you will be retaliated against.
Yeah, I love that walk away fund idea. That's really beautiful.
Well, I used to call it something else, but I've gotten a little more
What did you used to
politically
call?
correct.
Oh, the FU fund, maybe? Is that what? Yeah. Yeah. That's a great thing because, yes, auditors can't compromise their integrity. They can't compromise their reputation. They can't flex that much because then they become useless. What people are trusting, they're trusting us to tell the truth. And if we start fudging the truth, what's the point of us?
Yeah, and
There's no point in us existing. So we have to walk away rather than fudge.
yeah, I saw Cynthia Cooper this summer, and I have goosebumps.
Tell me about Cynthia Cooper.
So she was the WorldCom whistleblower,
Okay.
and she just pulled the thread. Just kept pulling the thread, and external audit said, don't pay attention. And it changed her life. Like, she's never had a regular job since.
Mm.
I don't know if you know, but I am the fraud hashtag queen, and one of my hashtags is whistleblowers are heroes.
Yeah.
But the pressure, and she tells about some of the people she worked with who did cross the line.
Oh,
It was just one time. It's never one time.
yeah. Yeah.
And I was just talking with a colleague, and I said, it's never one time.
Mm-hmm.
Once you do it, they know.
Mm-hmm.
And if the person is, I don't want to say a bad person, but they themselves are compromised. Now they know that you're compromised.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the snowball.
And y'all can blackmail each other
Yeah.
If you say this, I'm going to out you on this,
Yeah.
and then it just gets worse and worse. And I love your idea of walking away.
That's the one gift I've given my children. I have been very clear to them. You will always have me as your walkaway fund.
Yeah.
And, I had a boss who he knew that I could walk away.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't ask me once. Did he ask? So he was boss. Did he ask my direct boss? Oh, yeah.
Mm.
Oh, yeah. She's still there.
Ask him to do what? I'm lost. Ask him to do what?
To do something unethical.
Oh, he didn't ask you.
Yeah, no, he didn't ask me because he knew I'd say no. I mean, sometimes, and like I say this because like in my 20s, I didn't have a walkaway fund, but I have always had the attitude, and people have just assumed, she'll leave.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
my friends say I'm very judgmental. I'm not judgmental. I just have I've got a line.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've not been asked to cross it.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of people's perception.
So when you teach auditors, when you're working with the curious and hungry auditors who are really eating up what you're telling them, what are some highlights that make auditors go, oh, and they kind of write that down? What are some things that really trigger them?
So I have something here. It's called Surprise and Delight. And
Okay. That sounds like Disney World.
I know. So I had a client who sent it to me. It's a luggage tag and it says Surprise and Delight.
Okay. All right.
You need to mix things up. And when I say surprise and delight, and I use this example, there was a woman who stole from her municipality.
Yeah.
And she knew the auditors, and this was more financial auditing. She knew the auditors would come every June. So she'd thieve through May 31st, stop thieving for the month of June. I don't know how she went cold turkey because she is a raging gambling addict.
Mm-hmm.
And then July 1st, she'd start thieving again. She knew they would only look at June. So surprise and delight is like the municipality should have not told her, and they should have just shown up.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Yellowbook-CPE, the heroes behind the jumbo bundle of self-study courses. With a 1-year subscription, you get access to over 170 hours of top-notch CPE content. Dive into thrilling tales of agile, IT auditing, fraud, and internal controls. All courses carry NASBA's quality seal, so you know they've got the superpower of trustworthiness. Just click the link in the description to sign up. And now, back to our story.
So this is a really funny story. There was a woman, Minnie Mangum, in North Carolina who stole a bunch of money. She was like the highest paid female banker at the time in the 1930s. She hired people that she didn't think were so smart. And the one got through. And she fired her once she realized how smart she was. But this woman, still got Minnie caught. What Minnie did was she became friends with all the janitors of other banks in town.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when auditors back then would come. They'd show up at night and do the count in the, the safes and everything like that. So most likely the auditors weren't going to show up at Minnie's bank first, but the janitors let them in and they immediately called Minnie.
Yeah.
So if you're a business owner or you work in a business and they know that you only look at checks, say over 10,000, pull one for 1,000. And, if you have a business that isn't supposed to take cash, I had this where a guy, his business partner wasn't supposed to take cash and he thought he was. I said, just have someone go in and try and pay with cash. And if the guy takes the cash, bingo. Like the creativity, like that's the surprise and delight. Think of, and I say this a lot, I always pay my water bill, my utilities on ACH. There are people in this planet who are unbanked who pay in cash. When I worked at a sheriff's office, I didn't realize people paid utilities with cash. But that's a whole different world that I'm not part of. You've got to be curious as to how many different ways can a utility get paid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that curiosity and the surprise and delight, that's what I like, surprise and delight.
The delight is facetious.
You give it a little bit.
Because
maybe.
it's not going to delight the fraudster
Right.
when you find them.
Yeah.
Now, I was always told, auditors have this little procedure we go through that is required by standards, right? Which is interview around fraud, see if interview key players and say, is there any possibility of fraud occurring in this organization? How could it occur? And then we're supposed to get together and brainstorm the risk of fraud, and then we risk assess those brainstormed ideas and say which of these is most likely, and then we say, are there any controls in place that would prevent this from happening? And if we feel like this is a potential, we're supposed to design procedures to test that fraud occurred, right? So we've got this little routine that we go through as auditors that are required by our audit standards. Not by IA standards, but by Yellowbook and AICPA standards. So, but I was always told as an auditor, if you find fraud, stop right there in your tracks, don't move, because you might ruin the case, and call an expert and ask them to step in and advise you on what to do next. Now, how do you feel about that advice?
Well, so that's interesting because like when I worked at the shoe company, it was usually we'd get a tip and it would come to us first,
The fraud
investigation.
investigators, right. But let's say this routine that the auditors go through,
Right.
they find something and then they say, which I was always told, don't do this. Then they keep digging and they get into files and they mess up the evidence. The chain of custody has been destroyed.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Well, I hate to give a shout out to lawyers, but this is a time for lawyers.
Lawyers, bummer.
Yeah, you've got you like, and my work is, until recently I've been a private investigator. I'm not anymore, but the lawyer is going to guide you, especially in a municipality or in a big corporation, because there are other things. They might find a fraud. It might not be material.
Yeah, but still in government,
Right. Exactly.
everything seems material. It's ridiculous.
Right. So, and
They could grow, whatever they're doing could grow.
right.
Right.
And it's like Cynthia Cooper. She pulled that one string, just kept pulling.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you I want to say, professional help. That's a terrible term, but like you also, I would think if I were an auditor and I saw this, like you don't want to like jump up and down and say fraud, because you know what?
No,
People
'cause
are
they'll
gonna,
cover it
and
up
you're
and
gonna have to maintain normalcy.
oh, yeah.
Like, the whole Rita Crenwell story,
Yeah, the woman that found her just had to act
it's
normal for
very
like a month.
difficult.
Imagine
Yeah.
the sleepless nights around that. "Oh, hi, Rita. How was your morning? How's your donut?"
Yeah.
Whatever, when you really are like, "You fraudster."
Yeah. Yeah. So to maintain that, it caused her to retire early. It
Oh, yeah,
was,
I'm sure it put a lot of gray in her hair.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but it's hard not to sit there and, again, the walk away fund, I'm going to say fraudsters generally are somewhat curious themselves. They're going to watch your behavior.
Oh,
Like the good fraudsters are going to watch your behavior and go, oh, something there. I think they might know something.
mm,
I mean, the really good fraudsters, they is there ever been a con man who hasn't been delightful? No, they're delightful.
yeah.
Like they're charismatic, they're helpful.
There have been fraudsters who are not charming and delightful. I know of a few who are really quirky jerks. Yeah, so the fraudsters I've had personal experience with are not charming people. They are jerks. Hard to work with, and they're like dogs who bark and keep everybody away.
The other thing I'm going to say is document. Like,
Yeah, sure.
just the heck out of everything. And even things that you might think are innocuous.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I worked with someone who was a terrible note taker. I'm like, oh my God. And she was a lot younger. And I think she just thought, well, I'll just remember it. It's like, no. Like,
Yeah. This was an investigator that was a terrible note taker, or this
Oh,
was an
yeah.
auditor? Yeah.
The investigator.
Yeah.
And the auditors I worked with, they're just like, "Oh my god, I'm like, "Yep, no notes."
Mm.
Like, very minimal notes.
Mm.
Now some attorneys might like very minimal notes. Um,
Yeah.
not a good thing, because the other thing is these cases there's no CSI. They drag on and on and on,
Oh,
and your
yeah,
memory
for 5,
fades.
6 years, right.
Yeah, your memory fades.
Oh, yeah.
So
Good tip.
I would document, and even, again, innocuous things like, so and so he is here every day at 9, and since I've discovered this, they're not showing up until the afternoon, or things that you might think are not so
Mm.
important might be
Mm.
important. There might be
Mm.
a reason, and if nothing else, it gives, when you're uploading the information to your investigator or to your lawyer,
Mhm.
something that you don't think maybe is all that important might be really a great question in a deposition, or just a information seeking interview. It's like, you know, is there some reason why you've stopped showing up to work until noon?
Yeah.
Do you?
What would you say is the most interesting case you've worked on? And I know you can't name names, or can you give us a generic, case that you've personally worked on that
Um,
was
yeah. Um, as a CFE private investigator, I worked with an attorney on an embezzlement case of a nonprofit.
Mm.
And, what was interesting, and the attorneys would disagree with me on this, but, uh, the nonprofit, there was a life estate involved, and money and property, and the women were really close until they weren't. And then when it blew up badly. And so
Mm.
there were lawsuits and cross lawsuits and everything like that. But this is where, um, the attorneys are looking at one thing to get our client, the defendant, off. And I said, these people will never write her a check.
Who won't give her a dime?
The nonprofit won't give her a dime because she had a life estate, so she was going to give up her home that her grandmother had given her,
Okay.
because they wanted her out of the nonprofit.
Okay.
And I said to the attorneys, I said, they'll never write her a dime because these people have issues about money. And I said, this is the solution. They can give her a piece of property. So this is what happened. They accused the executive director of taking money out of the not-for-profit.
And using it to pay her bills or to
Yes.
Okay. So the ladies were close. It was a small organization. They saw her taking money and paying her personal bills or paying for her own car, something like that, is what she was using the money for.
Well, they assumed that.
They assumed it. Okay. And then
They get her arrested
they get her arrested.
for embezzlement. Yes. And that's how it comes to us.
Oh, she comes to you, a lawyer and a fraud investigator,
Yeah.
to clear her name.
Yes. Not go to jail
Okay.
for stealing.
Not go to jail. Gotcha.
So the case goes on and on and on. And I've interviewed a ton of people, and I know that these women will not give her a dime, even though she's going to have to leave her home that was given to her. So she needs money, and rightfully so. It's like a life estate. It's a life estate.
So she has no income. She's
Right.
lost her job. She's having to pay lawyers' fees.
Well, that was actually covered by E&O for her.
By who?
She had an insurance policy. The nonprofit had an insurance policy.
Insurance policy against that. Okay. So this was a false accusation.
They'd still disagree about that, but yeah.
Okay. So she was about to lose her home. She wanted to be reimbursed for all of her lost wages. And
Yeah. And she wanted to leave town. So they're not going to give her money, even though they've got stocks and they have a lot of property. So I go to the attorneys and I said, they won't write her a check. They've just got this issue about money.
what kind of issue is that?
Well, the stock market was starting to crater, and
All right.
they were spending a lot of money. And so, they have this big endowment, not huge, and it's going down, and they're
All
panicking.
right. All right.
But they've got over 400 acres. And I said, just ask for some property, and she can turn around and sell the property. So we asked for $100,000 in a check. No way. They practically give us the finger. So fast forward, I tell the lawyers, I was like, ask for property.
Mm-hmm.
That's what worked. She got, I believe, 40 acres worth of property, which she sold immediately for guess how much money?
$1 million.
Yes, bingo.
Oh, I just love that number. $1 million.
So they could have written her a check for $100,000.
Mm.
Instead, they gave her a piece of property worth 10 times that.
Mm. Mm.
And it was the creativity. I knew these people couldn't mentally write a check.
Mm.
And I said, but they don't care about the property.
Mm.
And the property is really valuable.
Mm.
And so now I will admit the attorneys negotiated it. And I would have thrown my arms up with the negotiations went on forever. I would have said, just go away, you people. But they stuck at it. But the client, said to the attorneys, well, this was Kelly's idea. And of course, the attorneys are like, well, we got it done.
Oh.
And it was just kind of funny, but it was the whole creativity of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That is. Yeah.
And like, again, I think audit is creative.
Well, performance auditors are very creative. Yes. And financial auditors too, because,
Yeah.
with that surprise and delight idea,
Yeah.
they do have to come up with ways to get the evidence they need in a new way.
Yeah.
Every time. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that the AICPA was really pushing for many years ago. I think they've let up is every time you approach an audit subject, you're supposed to refresh your procedures and do something new instead of using what we call canned audit programs, just doing the same
Sally.
thing over and over. Because
Sally, same as last year.
Same as last year. That's it. Because the auditee eventually figures it out.
Yep. It was the beginning of my hatred of lawyers.
Yeah, I'm going to try to hold back on that right now. I'm going to try to stay cool.
Yeah.
What I notice in my environment is that lawyers in audit organizations prevent auditors from saying the truth. So they will whitewash the report.
Yeah. We call it a word salad.
Word salad.
It's like they get paid per word.
Yeah, they do that. Their writing is horrific. But what they do is they'll say, oh, you were going to say this really straightforward thing right here. No, we're not going to say that.
Yeah.
And so they just erase the truth out of the report until it just becomes pablum. It's a nothing. So whenever I hear a lawyer gets to approve the report before it goes out, I know that it's going to be softened.
I mean, that's why I gave up being a PI. There's no value add. And they just caused this huge kerfuffle. And it was a hot mess. And like my assistant special agent in charge, he's just like, stop. Like these guys are just like, yeah. And at the time, I found it to be an annoyance because they were asking me questions that I knew nothing of. But when it was all said and done, and looking back at it, it really was to protect me. It was because I was taking over the books. I got a clean set of books because the guy before me, and I didn't look at it that way. And had the auditors explained that to me, it would have gone a lot better for them. I have, and that's what I really appreciate about audit. They're more technically savvy. The other interesting thing is, I always thought audit, I needed an accounting degree. And then I went to an event and I sat next to a woman who's now like a municipal auditor. She has a pretty big job. And she was a performance auditor. And I was like, what's a performance auditor? And so I've coached a lot of people and they're like, well, I don't have accounting. And I'm like, you don't need accounting to be an auditor. And that's a huge thing for people. And because I'll see these young people, I'm like, I could tell you want to make it better. I'm not, I've worked with auditors. I love the work that they do because it's an improvement. Whereas investigators just take someone out and then, a lot of times they take someone out and nothing happens. You still can have a hole that you can drive a truck through. So yeah, so that's more, I like auditors because they help. Auditors can protect you. I tell people who, get on a nonprofit in an important position, I'm like, you should have an audit done. So you're clean.
Yeah, that's good. That's good wisdom.
This was awesome. Thank you.
You're awesome, Kelly. Good luck.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, brave listeners, for joining us on this adventure. We appreciate your loyalty. Take a moment to subscribe and share this podcast with all your audit allies. And don't miss out on Yellowbook-CPE's upcoming webinars. Because every superhero needs their training, and Yellowbook-CPE offers continuing education that's relevant, convenient, and as thrilling as the fight for justice. Until next time, audit on!